you. Fantastic. Good.
Yes.
So, hi, Eslon. Nice to meet you. It's Eslon, right? Eslon Hindundu.
Yes, Eslon Hindundu. That's my name. Yes.
Okay,
Nice to meet you
good.
too.
Yes, fantastic. Thank you very much for agreeing to take part in this interview. So I've decided to start to run a number of interviews to talk to African composers about themselves, their works, and everything surrounding them as African composers. So thank you very much.
Yes, no, thank
Can
you so much for
me?
Yes, I can hear you. Yes, I just wanted to say thank you so much for inviting me. Actually, this is quite a very good. It's a very good platform to get to know each other, but as well as other composers, because I've seen a few of the interviews that you have posted on Facebook there. So it's quite interesting. And thank you.
Thank you. So I'd like to begin with the question about where you are from. Can you just quickly tell us where you are from, and then we can kick off from there.
Yes, I'm from Namibia, in a village called Oshinene. It's close to Hobabes. It's in the eastern parts of the country. So it's quite a very small place, a very small populated place as well. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
What are the languages?
Well, where I come from, there's quite a few languages, mainly Oshiherero and Tswana. But then in Namibia itself, we have a few languages. We have Damara, Kwekwe, Anama, we have Oshwambo, we have Silosi, and all that. Yeah. So it's quite. We're more like a diverse country as well in terms of languages and culture and really rich culture.
Okay, all right. Yeah. And looking at your music now, was there any particular moment in time? Was there an event? Was it a person that sparked your interest in music composition?
First of all, I started singing in choirs, and I think that's where I got my whole influences. Since I mainly write for choirs as well. But what really gave me that spark of composing was when I toured with the choir to Germany and America, and I got exposed to Eric Whittrigel music, and I think ever since then I really loved composition, and I really wanted to do composition. And I wrote my first song called Shimedirenko, which means that when I come back from there, you will see me. So in other words, I was just saying that when I come back from the US, you start seeing my work.
Oh, yes. Okay. Has that been performed anywhere, or is it a solo? Is it a choral piece?
Yeah, it's a choral piece, and it was performed by the Koto Youth Choir, 2013. Yes, it was performed by Koto Youth Choir in 2013.
Okay.
Very interesting composition.
Yeah. It sounds like it must have been, and that was your first composition, and it was performed almost immediately after you composed it.
Yes, definitely. Almost actually immediately, because the conductor, when I went to the conductor, I was like, "Say, I finished this composition. I have this piece that I composed when I was in the United States with the choir," and I was like, "Oh wow, it's interesting. So let's do it." Then we had a few performances, and as well, it was recorded by the choir as well on their second album. I mean, yes.
Wow. Okay, that's really good. Congratulations on that. That's really good. And we want to talk about your influences now as a composer. Who are your influences? Do you have any influences? I mean, it's not compulsory that you do, but do you have any? Can we know who they are?
Yes, I think, as I said earlier, Eric Whittrigel is actually my huge influence in my music, especially my choral works. I listen to a lot of his music, and I really love his music. I don't know, especially when it comes to cluster harmony. I just love the way it sounds, the way it brings the audience in terms of emotions and all that. So Eric Whittrigel is one of my biggest influence. And when it comes here in Namibia, Engelad Munait, I think you know him as well. He's one of the people that has really been there for me and has really encouraged me a lot regarding this, and has a huge influence on my music as well. So those are the two main composers that I would say have a huge influence on my compositions.
Okay, well, that's good to know. So, one Namibian, I think, or one African composer and one non-African composer. That's interesting. Now, we've
Yes.
talked about your work, so I want to play an example,
Hmm.
and this is titled "Looks." So we'll play this for our viewers and our audience to listen to. Um, so this is titled "Looks" and was composed by our guest composer of the day.
Yes.
Guest composer of the day. Um, I don't know if it is okay for me to say this because I should be an impartial interviewer, but that was absolutely beautiful.
Thank you.
Well done.
Thank you. Thank
Um,
you.
yes. And I'm not going to pretend to be a musical scholar to start asking you about the influences around that music, considering what you said before about Unaev
Mm.
and yes, and Eric Whittaker. Are there any influences from them in that particular piece? And can you tell us, give us some background to that piece, where that came from? It's so atmospheric, it's ethereal, it's some would say heavenly. Just talk through that piece and the influence.
Um, Definitely that I think there you hear a lot, especially the beginning of the looks. So when you get the sopranos, the female voices coming in with that cluster harmony, you really hear a lot of Eric Richiker in there. So this song was actually composed in 2018 for the Kota Youth Choir, the youth choir that are singing. They took part in the World Choir Games in 2018 in South Africa, and they performed that piece. That was actually performed in Pretoria at the World Choir Games. That recording. It's quite a very personal song for me because it was actually dedicated to my mom, to my grandmother that passed away. It actually looks at Tenra from the Requiem that I composed. So I was just trying to dedicate it and just to show, let eternal light shine upon you and shine upon wherever you are and rest in eternal peace. So that's basically my saying, my goodbye to my grandmother. But yeah, you hear in this piece specifically, you hear a lot of Eric Whittaker and throughout the chords. If you really analyze it very peacefully, you hear a lot of Eric Whittaker pieces with a cluster harmony and that. Yes.
Okay, well, that's truly moving to hear about who it's dedicated to and the drive behind the piece. It's actually beautiful. That's a beautiful one. And two things have come out of this. One, the language that you composed in, and the fact that you sing. We are not going to listen to you singing today because I didn't put up that video. I wanted to focus more on you as a composer and
As the
you
composer, yes.
and as a conductor. So,
Yes.
so yeah, we're going to look at another video later on. But yes,
Yeah.
just to also point that out to anybody who is watching us that he sings as well. Google Eslon Hindundu, you will find videos of him online. There is one I found actually a short while ago of you singing with Kula Blessing Present as well.
Yes.
And another person. Yeah, three of you in front of the choir. And I thought, wow, there is collaboration between the composers in Namibia, but we'll get to that point. We'll get to that point. So yes,
yes, yeah.
Who are interested.
That's good.
And I wanted to talk about, you as I want to talk about today's composers. Do you think that today's composers are creating new sounds? Do you think that composers are contributing something new, are creating and adding to Africa's history? What is going to be called Africa's history tomorrow? What is going to be called the canon of sounds by African composers? Today, we look at the composers of the past. We don't really have that many on record because our history is not so heavily written down and recorded. Do you think that if looking back, have a few of them, you today, the other composers of today, are they creating something that we can point at tomorrow and say that is African music by African composers? Or are we mainly using the styles of what some will call European composers, Western composers? Is there anything being added? Is there anything that you can point at and say, this is the canon of music by African composers, and it is specifically in this style, which is unique to Africa?
Yes, definitely. I think that composers nowadays in our life, they are adding to African music, really. Because I would look at, I'll make an example of Michael Barrett. He's a South African composer, arranger as well, from the University of Pretoria, conductor, and he takes all these African musics and then he will arrange them. But with arranging it, he will keep true to the African elements, adding new to all the adding foreign elements in it. And I think this is the era that we are living in, because we are living in a contemporary era. So there's quite a lot of contemporary pieces that are coming from a lot of African composers and all that. So definitely, and I think that the composers that were there, that were in the past, that we look at now, they really shaped path for us to continue this. I know it may be quite difficult now, and being very, very tough, because it's quite strange to people's eyes. I mean, to people's ears. But then I believe that in the future, in the near future, 50 years, 100 years to come, a lot of people are going to look at us, and they are going to look at our music, and they will study from our music. And I think it's just how music works in general. It just goes in a circle. Just continues like that.
Okay. Now that you've mentioned, history and people looking back at the works of composers of today, there is something I was wondering about, especially if you consider classical music. That's a very unique field. There is some ownership of classical music by certain people in certain parts of the world, where they say, well, actually, what you are writing is not classical because you have to be trained, you have to be qualified and all of that. But let's not go into that. I want to mention the fact that in Namibia, you held an event called the Celebration of Stories.
Yes.
And it's described as an event where stories are being told and celebrated in local languages, in Namibian languages, I suppose, and beyond that. Yes. Now, there are some challenges that African composers face when it comes to writing in the classical style, because I think that event was not just to encourage listening to stories that are written by Africans for Africans in song, but to listen to them as part of classical compositions, right? Good. And there are challenges that Africans face, because some might say, well, actually, as an African, you should write only in this particular style. You are writing in classical style, but we already have this kind of music that we like. Why are you trying to introduce this new brand that belongs to somebody else? There is also the concern that, well, as an African, if I call you an African composer, you have no right to classical music composition. Classical belongs to somebody else. So are we losing our culture? Are we losing our style? This is taking feedback from others now. Are we betraying something by trying to stick to classical? Who is going to write in the African style? What is the African style? Some people think that it has to be drumming. I discussed this with another composer the other day. Some people think there must be drums, percussions, dancing, up and down, dressed in a particular way. Is there how do you see yourself? Where do you fit in? Do you have to fit into one side or the other? How how should we as composers, should we feel free to fit into either one? Sorry, I know it's quite long-winded, but it's all about, fitting
Yes,
in
yeah.
as an African.
No, I believe that, I mean, as a composer or as an artist, you need to be free to express yourself. I mean, freedom of arts. So whatever you as a composer would love to do, you just need to do it. And regarding the thing of the world, looking at African composers, that they should really just compose for African music, and it should have drums, it should have this rhythm, it should have that. I think that a lot of people are just misunderstand the whole thing, because we as composers, specifically me, I would love to compose all genres. I would love to combine the two. I would love to just just to get a common ground for that as well. But then you need to be free. Like, for example, I mean, the piece that we just listened to, right? That's basically a very classical piece. I don't think there's any African elements in it, but the fact that it makes me an African, it is an African piece. It is I would say that, even though I think a lot of few people have different views regarding this. And when it comes to Africans, I mean, for example, what I experienced on that celebration of stories concert, we realized that actually people are not educated about the whole classical music at all. I mean, if they are exposed to it, they will really be interested in it. They are interested in it, but it's just that we are not a large population of Namibians, or maybe Africans. I'm not sure how it is in other countries, but it's just not exposed enough to African music to understand it. So whenever you take it to them, they feel like, it's I don't know, this is a foreign thing to us, but if you keep it little by little and introducing it little by little with something they like, for example, a contemporary piece, I think they will start being interested in it.
Okay. Okay.
Yes.
What you've talked about now, that last point actually touches on something very important. Some composers, not just African composers, find it or have a lot of difficulty with getting performed. Okay. So looking at what you did with the celebration of stories, and what I said earlier about you singing with Tula Presents, Unaib, and your choir behind you, you are relatively widely performed and well known. So, and a celebration of stories, I guess, feeds into this. What are there some things that you do to support other African composers?
Here in Namibia, we have this with me, Tula Presents, and Osmond and Engelhardt and Emily Dangwa, all the composers here. We have this vision of working together as one composers, because we have realized that if we don't work together, then nothing is gonna develop here in Namibia. Nothing that is gonna start, because then everything would just be separated and all that. So we try to work with each other as much as possible to build the whole choral industry and music industry, classical industry here in Namibia, as we are currently facing a little challenges in because it's going down the hill a little bit. So we are trying to revive it, and by working together, by having projects together with different choirs, with and also orchestras here in Namibia as well. Yeah.
Okay, so that's commendable. So I don't know who composed Omurite, but I want to play Omurite now, because we talked about you supporting other composers. It's very important for conductors, choir leaders, choirs to support others. So let's listen to Omurite now. I think this is a beautiful piece. We'll play this for our audience.
Yeah.
Hindundu, sorry. That's another beautiful piece. I don't really know who composed it, but I think that's an example of, again, Eslon as a conductor, but Eslon supporting other composers. You want to say a little bit about that?
That composition was composed by two of my choir members in the choir, and that's Ime Shua Kayao and Lynette Muramba. So I when I heard the piece, when they told me that they have a composition, I felt like, and they are female. And this is something that we are also lacking here in Namibia, that females are
And
not really
Africa.
so well in Africa. Yes, female composers are not really so well supported, or they are not that well exposed, because so many male composers are dominating. So for me, I really wanted to highlight that fact that, you know, as Namibians, as conductors, as musicians, we need to support each and every one in the industry of music. So that was one of the examples that I did. Later on, when I did a concert for my launching concert for my choir, you know, on the 16th of November, and half of my music, half of the repertoire were composed by the two composers. That's Lynette Muramba and just to support, just to show them that, you know, you can literally go far with this. Because it's also a thing here in Africa. We have this thing of, you know, you can't make a living out of music, you know, and that's something that we would love to change here. That, you know, we need to get out there no matter what, even if it's difficult. You just need to keep on pushing and pushing and pushing. Yes.
That is, I mean, speaking as somebody who knows what is happening, because I'm not just going to gloss over that and say, well, they did that for two composers. That is really important what you've done. You know, recognizing that these works had value and deciding to perform them, you know, in your launch concert for the choir and Omorite as an example. That's really, really important. Sometimes you start to wonder, do established, well-known composers, do they not recognize the struggles of others? You know, why are they not putting in the effort to support others? So that's really, really commendable that you did that. So speaking about making a living out of music composition now, just to dig a little bit deeper into that point, we do know that African musicians, let's speak generally of musicians, make a lot of money out of performing, you know, and singing. What are the challenges that you think specifically composers of, for example, is your style of music will face? You've talked about the audience perhaps not being there, not being well versed with this style of music. What other challenges do you see?
Well, I think that's the main challenge that most people here in Africa or in Namibia are not so educated enough regarding classical music. They don't see the value of it, or they don't understand it. So with that, it makes it very difficult for musicians, specifically classical musicians, to make a living here in Namibia or in Africa as well, because the government as well is no more supporting such things. I mean, looking at the economy as well, is not doing that well. So the only thing that they look at is cutting the arts. So that is one of the biggest challenge that we face here. I mean, as an African composer or as a musician, that we just don't get enough support or even exposure, because now whenever corporates or whenever there's events, they mainly just look at the pop artists and the Afro pop and all these local artists, but not really classical musicians. And that's one big challenge.
Yeah, so I suppose the established composers can help the up and coming composers by trying to make inroads. For example, what you talked about, events, you know, corporate events. I've noticed that a lot of composers and performers, non-pop, so not the ones that are rap and pop music, but classical, try to attend these events to get themselves a place to perform at, you know, birthdays, weddings. So I suppose one thing that can be done to help all composers is for established composers to go in with their choirs to perform and say, listen, this kind of music is here. It's great. It's fantastic. It's by us as well. And even if they want the Western styles, these are available and we can perform them. So that's, as long as we keep pushing in the right direction, and those who are established to push as well, that would be very helpful. Again, as with all the previous two interviews, is painfully coming to the end of the interview, but I want to just talk about, you know, topics beyond beyond your audience, the audience that knows your music, the audience that appreciates your style of music, to the wider context of us as Africans, as a people, as a continent. The power of music to make change. Do you believe in music as an instrument for change in society?
Well, music has been the biggest powerful tool in uniting and bringing people together. So definitely, music is one of the biggest power or weapon that we can use as Africans to change every situation that we are in. Whatever. I mean, looking in a history, looking into like the European history, music had played a huge role in bringing everyone together, in writing stuff together. Today we study about that. I mean, if we can all get together as Africans musicians and really unite and really take it forward, we can really unite this whole continent and make a lot of things better for ourselves through music.
Okay, so you believe in the power of music to make positive change, to bring about.
Yes, I mean, I'm sure music has changed your life. It has changed my life personally. Talking about that, so if it can do that to me, if it can transform me into a man that I am now, or a musician that I am now, then it can do that to everyone in Africa. So we should just really just stand together and really go forward with this.
And this is not just a message, by the way, for anybody listening, that Eslon is passing. He and his fellow composers, the ones he has managed to reach and contact in Namibia, they've come together. So when he says stand together, he's not just giving advice that he doesn't follow. They are standing together. If you Google them, you will find them on Facebook as well.
Yes.
You see the photographs together, them performing together. So it's absolutely important. Yes, music brings people together. People were from different backgrounds, different viewpoints about life. And unity is always commendable and admirable. Yeah. So I mean, all I can say is thank you very much, for giving us your time this lovely morning. Happy to hear about the rains where you are. Thank you, and keep it up, keep up the good work, and let's all stay in touch. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for organizing this interview. I really had so much fun talking to you, and I hope it's not the last time doing this, because it would be great to do it more often.
Oh, brilliant. Yes. Absolutely. Why not? Why not? All right. Nice meeting you, though. Thank you to all our viewers as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.